There is a country at this World Cup so small you could fit its entire population into a single mid-sized city, 500,000 people, no football history to speak of, playing in their first ever World Cup, and somehow they didn't just turn up, they went unbeaten in the group, they drew with Spain, they drew with Uruguay, a two-time world champion who is now on a plane home, while this tiny island nation is still here in the knockout rounds waiting for Lionel Messi and Argentina. This is Cape Verde. And what they've just done is, statistically, one of the most absurd things in the entire history of this tournament. So how? How is a country of 500,000 people surviving the World Cup while giants are packing their bags? Because I promise you, the answer is not luck. There is a system behind this, a brilliant, almost sneaky system, and once you see it, you'll understand why this might be the future of international football. Let's start with just how ridiculous this is. Cape Verde is an archipelago off the west coast of Africa. 10 islands, around 525,000 people. That makes them the smallest nation by population ever to reach the knockout stage of a men's World Cup. Not this year, ever. The previous record holder, Northern Ireland, back in 1958, was nearly 3 times bigger. To put it in American terms, Cape Verde has fewer people than the state of Wyoming, roughly the size of Lexington, Kentucky. A city essentially made the last 32 of the World Cup, ahead of Uruguay, ahead of a Saudi side that spent a fortune building its game on their very first attempt. And they didn't sneak through by parking the bus and getting lucky once. Look at the group, a 0-0 draw with Spain, the pre-tournament favourites, in which their 40-year-old goalkeeper Vorzinha, a man who last season was playing in the Portuguese second division, made 7 saves. 7. Then a 2-2 draw with Uruguay, scoring the first World Cup goals in their history. Then a final 0-0 against Saudi Arabia to seal it. 3 games unbeaten against opponents who on paper should have brushed them aside. The first debutant nation to go unbeaten in the group stage since Senegal in 2002, the first newcomers in the knockouts since Slovakia in 2010. So this is not a fluke. A fluke is one good night. This was 3, which means something real is going on underneath, and here is where it gets fascinating. Because Cape Verde figured out years ago a truth that most small nations refuse to accept. They cannot win by relying only on the players born on their islands. The talent pool is simply too shallow. 500,000 people will never outproduce France or Brazil. So instead of fighting that, they did something clever. They looked outward. Here is the secret. The Cape Verdean diaspora, the people of Cape Verdean heritage living abroad, is actually larger than the population of Cape Verde itself. Generations of Cape Verdeans emigrated to Portugal, to the Netherlands, to France, to Luxembourg, building communities all over Europe, and their children grew up not in tiny island academies, but inside the best football development systems on the planet. So Cape Verde's federation made a decision in the late 2000s. They would go and find those players, the sons and grandsons of emigrants born and raised in Europe, trained by European academies, and invite them to represent the country of their heritage. And it worked spectacularly. Of the 26 players Cape Verde brought to this World Cup, 14 were born overseas, 13 of them in Western Europe. Let that sink in. There are more players in this squad born in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, than in Praia, the actual capital city of Cape Verde. Think about what that means. A nation of 500,000 people effectively gets to harvest talent that was developed for free by the academies of Portugal and Holland and France. They get players with European training and island heritage, the best of both worlds. A country that could never afford to build that infrastructure simply imports the results of someone else's. That is the engine. But an engine alone doesn't win you games, and this is the part one love, because a lot of countries have a diaspora. What Cape Verde did with theirs is the real masterstroke. They didn't just throw a random collection of European-born players together and hope. They built an identity. The head coach Pedro Brito, everyone calls him Bubista, has been molding this squad for around half a decade. No chaos, no constant managerial sackings, no throwing it all away after one bad result, just patient, steady building. And the result is a team with a crystal clear personality, compact, defensively disciplined, horrible to play against. A team that sits in shape, refuses to break, and frustrates technically superior opponents until they make a mistake. That's how you draw with Spain. Not by trying to out-football Spain, you can't. But by being so organized, so stubborn, so unified that all their brilliance smashes against a blue wall and bounces off. They even have a word for their spirit, morabeza, a Cape Verdean term that roughly means warmth, openness, no stress. And you can see it in how they play, fearless, loose, enjoying every second with absolutely nothing to lose. And here's the thing you need to understand. Cape Verde is not some weird exception. They are the extreme example of the single biggest trend at this entire World Cup. Look around the tournament. Curaçao, an island even smaller than Cape Verde, had 25 of their 26 players born abroad, almost all in the Netherlands. Morocco, a genuine dark horse, has 19 squad members born in Europe. In fact, 24% of every single player at this World Cup was born in just 5 countries: England, France, Germany, Spain, or the Netherlands. This is the new map of international football. The old idea that a national team is 11 local boys who grew up kicking a ball in the same town is quietly dying. The nations that are rising fastest are the ones who understood that their real talent pool isn't their borders. It's their bloodline scattered across the richest academies in the world. Cape Verde just did it better and earlier than almost anyone. So now they stand in the round of 32 facing Messi and Argentina, the reigning world champions, in Miami. And let's be honest, they will probably lose. Argentina are a different universe of quality, and the fairy tale most likely ends here. But it almost doesn't matter, because the diaspora in the United States is huge, and the stadium in Miami is going to be a sea of blue, roaring for the smallest nation ever to come this far. They'll have something close to a home crowd 3,000 miles from their islands. Whatever happens against Argentina, Cape Verde has already rewritten what's possible. They've proven that a country of 500,000 people with almost no football history can look the giants in the eye and refuse to blink if they're smart enough about how they build. They were never supposed to be here. That was the whole assumption. Too small, too poor, too new. They just quietly proved that none of that is a rule anymore. And the giants who underestimated them, most of them are already watching from home.